All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into something today that I bet you've got in your pocket or purse right now,
Oh, yeah.
the US penny. And,
Mhm.
we're looking at this surprisingly heated debate that's been going on about whether this little coin
Yeah.
should stay or should it go.
Yeah.
And you guys have given us some really fascinating stuff to look at. We've got some quotes from former President Trump on the production of pennies
Oh,
and
yeah.
arguments from both sides of the coin.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
So, so where do we even begin with this?
Well, it's funny, it's a topic that a lot of people think is kind of trivial, but when you really get into it, it really gets you thinking about how we value things.
Yeah.
Not just money, but our time, the environment, even our traditions.
Yeah, and I think we should just address this right off the bat.
Right.
The elephant in the room, or it's
Right.
the penny in the piggy bank, right?
Right.
It's been costing more to make a penny than its face value for like almost 20 years now.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild. And in 2024, it was over 3 cents per penny.
Wow.
And even former President Trump called it wasteful.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So I mean, is it ever justifiable then for a government to lose money on its currency?
Well, I mean, that's the real debate, right? I mean, usually governments profit from making money. It's called seigniorage.
Right.
But with the penny, that profit has vanished. So it really comes down to this. Is the convenience of having this tiny denomination really worth that loss? It's a question that economists and even presidents have been grappling with.
And it's not just the cost of making these things, right?
Right.
You've got to think about the materials, the zinc and the copper. I mean, that's got to have an impact on the environment,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, mining for those metals definitely takes its toll on the environment. So, we're talking about convenience versus environmental responsibility, which is really interesting because it forces us to think about these larger issues.
Yeah, it is. It's like this tiny little thing that has all these.
It's the symbol. Yeah.
Yeah.
For all these bigger problems.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the penny itself, it's gone through a lot of changes throughout its history, right? It wasn't always this mix of zinc and copper, was it?
No, not at all. I mean, it started out as pure copper, and then during World War II, they actually had to switch to steel because copper was needed for the war effort.
Wow.
Yeah. And so each of these changes kind of tells a story about what was happening in the economy at the time, like what materials were available, how much they cost, and then, how that all tied into what people thought a 1-cent piece was actually worth.
So given all of these changes, like with the materials and everything, is it really so crazy to think about just getting rid of the penny altogether? I mean, some people argue that it's basically become too small to be useful. Like
Well,
the Harvard economist, what was his name?
and Gregory Mankiw?
And Gregory Mankiw, yeah. He said that when people start leaving pennies behind at the cash register, it's a sign that they're not really serving their purpose anymore.
Right. I mean, I'm sure most people listening have a jar or a dish
Oh, yeah.
filled with pennies somewhere in their house just collecting dust.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah. And having pennies, like, lost most of their buying power.
Oh, absolutely.
What can you even buy with a penny these days?
Well, the former U.S. Mint director, Philip N. Deal, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said that if you're earning more than minimum wage, the time and effort it takes to bend over and pick up a penny off the sidewalk actually costs you more than the penny itself.
Wow.
So is your time really worth less than a cent?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these arguments for getting rid of the penny, they seem pretty compelling.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's another side to this, right?
Oh, of course.
What are some of the arguments that people make for keeping the penny?
Well, one of the most vocal groups who want to keep the penny around is Americans for Common Sense.
Okay.
And their main argument is that getting rid of the penny wouldn't actually save money in the long run.
Really?
Yeah, because then we'd need more nickels for everyday transactions. And the ironic thing is, nickels actually cost more to make than they're worth, too.
So we'd just be trading one costly coin for another.
Exactly. So it's not as simple as just getting rid of the penny. It's more complicated than that. Plus, Americans for Common Sense, they point out that public opinion is actually pretty divided on the issue.
Yeah.
Some people actually like having pennies around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
There's a nostalgia factor.
yeah, as a kid, I used to love tossing pennies in fountains.
Oh, yeah, it's like a lucky
I
thing.
felt magical. Yeah.
It's like a little ritual.
Yeah.
So that sentimental value is something to consider, even though, it's hard to really measure that
All right.
against like pure economics. And speaking of economics,
Yeah.
there's the whole concept of seigniorage.
Right. We touched on that a little bit earlier, and that's the profit that the government makes from just producing currency, right?
Exactly.
Even if a coin costs more to make than its face value.
Right. So even if the penny itself represents a loss for the government, that loss might be offset by the role that it plays in just keeping the currency circulating.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say what a loss actually means in this situation.
Yeah. It's not as easy as it seems.
No, it's definitely more nuanced than that.
It's like you got to look at the bigger economic picture.
Exactly. And that bigger picture includes how getting rid of the penny might actually affect consumers,
Right.
especially when it comes to prices.
And you're talking about the rounding tax here.
Exactly.
So what does that mean?
So the rounding tax, that's basically the idea that if we got rid of pennies and we started rounding prices up or down to the nearest nickel, it could end up costing people more money, especially people who mostly use cash, which tend to be people with lower incomes. So the concern is that getting rid of the penny might actually hurt the people who can least afford it.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah, and Raymond Lombra, he was an economist at the Federal Reserve. He's been really vocal about this.
Okay.
And he argues that this rounding, it would basically act like a regressive tax that hits lower income folks harder than anyone else.
So, I mean, if that's true, if this rounding tax is a real problem,
Yeah.
does that kind of weaken the argument that pennies are just too small to be useful?
That's a really good point.
Like maybe it's actually more useful
Good question.
to have that tiny 1 cent increment for people who need it, you know?
Yeah, it really makes you think about whose needs are being prioritized in this debate.
Yeah, and it makes me really curious to see how this is going to play out. So much to think about. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into the world of the penny. You know, before the break, we were talking about some of the possible downsides of getting rid of the penny, like that whole rounding tax thing.
Right.
But then I got to thinking,
Yeah.
a bunch of countries have already gotten rid of their smallest coins, right?
Yep.
So I mean, could we learn something from their experiences? Like what happened when they ditched their pennies?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's always good to see how other countries have handled these kinds of issues. So Australia, for example,
Okay.
they got rid of their 1 and 2 cent coins back in 1992.
Wow, that's a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, and the main reason was, to save money.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so they just rounded everything to the nearest 5 cents.
Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did they have any big problems with that? Like, did people freak out?
Surprisingly, it actually went pretty smoothly.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, businesses just adapted, people adjusted, and life went on.
Wow, so no riots in the streets.
No riots.
Yeah.
And actually, some unexpected good things happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what? I thought the whole point was just to save money.
Well, yeah, that was the main goal, but
Yeah.
Getting rid of those tiny coins,
Yeah.
it actually sped things up at the cash register.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no more fumbling around for pennies.
Yeah, I hate doing that.
Right. And it also, like we were saying before, it reduced the need to mine for those metals, which is good for the environment.
So faster checkouts, and it's good for the environment. I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, those are just like the immediate practical results. But then you got to think about the long term, right? Did they see any shifts in the economy
Yeah.
or changes in how people spend money?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and in the long run, what Australia's experience shows us is that getting rid of the penny probably won't lead to these huge price increases that some people are worried about.
Okay.
The market just kind of, adjusted. But, it's important to remember that Australia's economy is different from the U.S.
Yeah, much smaller.
Yeah, it's smaller and less complicated.
Right. So it's not a perfect comparison.
Exactly. But it does suggest that maybe those fears of economic disaster are a bit overblown.
Okay, so what about those European countries that got rid of their 1 and 2 cent euro coins?
Right.
Did they see the same kinds of results?
Pretty much, yeah. Finland, the Netherlands, Ireland, Italy, Belgium, Slovakia, they all got rid of their smallest euro coins, and they just round to the nearest 5 cents. And for the most part, it worked out fine.
Wow. So this is like a global trend.
Yeah, it seems like it.
A bunch of countries have done this, and the world hasn't ended.
Right, exactly.
So why is there so much resistance to this idea in the U.S.? Is there something different about about our situation?
Well, there are a few things that are different.
Okay.
I mean, one thing is just the sheer size of the U.S. economy.
Right, it's huge.
It's way bigger and more complex than a lot of these other countries.
Okay, so making a change like that
Yeah.
is going to have a bigger deal.
Definitely. And then there's the cultural aspect, too.
Oh, right,
You
right.
know, like, remember that feeling of tossing a penny into a fountain?
Oh, yeah.
Americans have this real sentimental attachment to the penny.
It's like a lucky thing.
Yeah, and it's seen as like a symbol of luck, of history, of tradition. And that might not be as strong in other countries.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's really embedded in American culture.
It is.
So if we did decide to get rid of the penny,
Yeah.
we'd have to think about all of that, like the feelings and the culture, not just the money part of it.
Absolutely. It's like we'd be saying goodbye to a little piece of Americana.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It wouldn't just be a change in our wallets. It would be like a change in how we think about things.
Exactly.
So let's say, just for fun, that the U.S. does say goodbye to the penny. What are some of the long-term implications of that, besides just, saving money?
Well, getting rid of the penny, it could be seen as a way of modernizing the U.S. currency system.
Yeah.
You know, it would be like saying, hey, our economy has changed and our money needs to change too.
Yeah.
The penny is, in a lot of ways, it's like a leftover from a time when things cost a lot less.
Yeah.
When a penny could actually buy you something.
Yeah, that's true. A penny doesn't really get you very far these days.
No, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the question of whether, if we get rid of the penny, do we start to think of smaller amounts of money as less important?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like does a nickel start to feel insignificant?
Huh.
And then a dime.
And then what? Where does it stop?
Right, exactly. It's an interesting psychological question.
Yeah, it really is. And it makes me think about the whole issue of financial literacy.
Oh, right.
Like, if we're not using pennies and nickels as much, do people lose track of how much even small amounts of money are actually worth?
That's a good point. If we make a big change to our money system,
Yeah.
we probably need to change how we teach people about money, too.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we've talked about the practical stuff, the economics, even the psychology,
Right.
but we haven't really talked about all those pennies that are already out there,
Right.
like billions of them.
Billions and billions.
Yeah, billions of these little zinc and copper discs.
Yeah.
So what happens to them if we stop making pennies?
Yeah. That's a question that doesn't get asked
Yeah.
enough. You
Yeah.
know, it's a lot of raw material.
Yeah.
We can't just, throw them away. So what do we do with them?
Exactly. Hopefully we don't just throw them in a landfill.
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about being environmentally responsible.
Right.
So what are the options?
Yeah, could we melt them down? Could we recycle them into something else?
Well, melting them down, that's probably the most practical thing to do. Zinc and copper, they're both really valuable
Right.
in all sorts of industries, like zinc, for example.
Yeah.
That's super important for galvanizing steel, which is used in construction and infrastructure.
So like bridges and buildings.
Exactly. And it's also used in things you wouldn't even think of, like batteries, sunscreen, even cosmetics.
So our old pennies could end up in bridges, buildings, the sunscreen I'm wearing.
It's possible.
Wow, that's kind of poetic.
Yeah, it's kind of cool when you think about it that way.
Yeah, it is. What about the copper?
Copper is amazing because it's such a great conductor of electricity.
Right.
So we need it for all sorts of electrical stuff like wiring, motors, generators, and it's also used for plumbing, roofing. It's a very versatile metal.
So we could take these little pennies that nobody really thinks about anymore,
Right.
and turn them into like really important stuff
Exactly.
for building our cities, powering our homes. I mean, maybe even advancing medical technology.
Yeah, it's almost like a metaphor for the whole penny debate.
Yeah.
It's about looking beyond the surface
Mm.
and seeing the potential for something new.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the ultimate upcycling project, right?
Oh, really?
We're taking this little thing that's practically worthless,
Right.
and turning it into something that's actually useful and valuable.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how everything is connected.
Yeah.
We start with a question about what to do with old pennies, and it turns into a conversation about sustainability and the future of industry.
And it's not just about the practical stuff either, right? Like symbolically, if the U.S. decided to melt down its pennies and give them a new purpose, that would say something about us, about our values.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It would be like a statement
Yeah.
about about letting go of the past and moving forward, using what we have to build a better future.
Yeah, it changes the whole story, right?
Right.
It's not about getting rid of something. It's about transforming it into something better. It's a story of progress and innovation and resourcefulness.
And it shows you how even small decisions can have big ripple effects.
Yeah, that's true. Getting rid of the penny isn't just about saving a few cents. It's about rethinking what's important, not just in terms of money, but in terms of resources too.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
The history of the penny, the economics, the global perspective, even what we might do with all that metal if we stop making pennies.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is, it really is. It's incredible how much there is to talk about when it comes to this tiny little coin.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you that even simple things can be really complicated.
Yeah, the penny is like a little window into all these bigger issues.
Right, exactly.
So as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts? Is the penny doomed, or is it going to stick around?
I think it all comes down to the people who make the decisions and the American people themselves. It's a tough call, yeah? Weighing the practical stuff against the sentimental stuff and then all the potential downsides.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer.
No, it's not, which is
Yeah.
probably why we're still having this debate.
That's true. That's true. Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today.
I hope so.
And no matter what happens with the penny, I think this deep dive has given everyone the information they need to form their own opinions.
Yeah, for sure. We always encourage you to keep learning and exploring.
Absolutely. So what do you think about the future of the penny? Head over to our website, let us know your thoughts, or share them on social media.
Yeah, join the conversation.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Okay, so we're back. And, for this final part of our deep dive into the penny, we've got to talk about something that we kind of touched on earlier. But
Yeah.
let's just imagine for a second
Yeah.
that the U.S. actually decides to get rid of the penny.
Oh, yeah.
What happens to all those billions of zinc and copper coins that are out there?
Right. Yeah, what do we do with all that metal? That's a question that doesn't get enough attention, I think.
No, it doesn't. It's not like we can just throw them in a landfill or something.
Right, especially after all this talk about being environmentally conscious.
Exactly. So what are the options? I mean, could we melt them down and I don't know, recycle them or something?
Well, I mean, melting them down is definitely the most practical option.
Okay.
Because both zinc and copper are incredibly valuable materials.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're used in so many industries.
Like what? What kinds of things?
Well, zinc, for instance, is really important for galvanizing steel,
Okay.
which is used everywhere in construction and infrastructure.
Oh, so like bridges and buildings and stuff.
Exactly. And it's also used in things you might not expect, like batteries,
Oh, wow.
certain sunscreens, even cosmetics.
So our old pennies could end up being part of bridges and buildings and even the sunscreen I'm wearing right now.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
Huh. It's kind of amazing when you think about it.
It is, yeah.
It's like the ultimate upcycling project.
Right.
What about the copper? Isn't that even more valuable?
Copper is super valuable because it's such a great conductor of electricity.
Right.
So it's used in wiring, motors, generators, all sorts of electrical applications.
Wow.
And it's also used in plumbing, roofing. It's a very versatile metal.
So we could take these tiny little pennies that people are leaving on the sidewalk
Right. Yes.
and turn them into all this important stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a metaphor for this whole debate about the penny.
Yeah, yeah.
It's about looking beyond just the surface and realizing the potential for something new and better.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we're taking this thing that some people think is worthless,
Right.
and we're transforming it into something that's actually really valuable and useful.
Exactly. And it shows how everything is connected.
Yeah.
We start by asking what to do with these old pennies, and it turns into a conversation about, using our resources wisely and building a more sustainable future.
And it's more than just practical, right? Like symbolically, if the US decided to melt down all these pennies and give them a new life, that would say something about us as a country.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It would be a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah.
It would be like saying, hey, we're not afraid to let go of the past, and we're ready to use what we have to create something better.
It's not about getting rid of something, it's about transforming it into something better, something more meaningful.
Exactly.
It's a story of progress and innovation.
And it shows you how even seemingly small decisions can have huge ripple effects.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we've really covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have, yeah.
We've talked about the history of the penny, all the economic arguments for and against getting rid of it.
The global perspective.
Yeah, the global perspective, and even, what might happen to all those billions of pennies if we do decide to say goodbye to them.
It's amazing how much there is to say about such a tiny little thing.
It really is. It's such a small object, but it brings up so many big questions and ideas.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does. It does. So as we wrap up, I'm curious to know your final thoughts.
Mm.
Is the penny doomed? Or is it gonna find a way to stick around?
I think the penny's fate is really in the hands of the people who make the decisions and the American people themselves.
Okay.
It's a tough choice, you know, trying to balance all the practical benefits of getting rid of it with the sentimental value that people attach to it and then all the potential downsides we've talked about.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer.
No, it's definitely not. Which is probably why we're still talking about it after all these years.
That's true. That's true. Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about.
I hope so.
No matter what happens with the penny, I think this deep dive has given everyone the information they need to form their own opinions.
Yeah, for sure. And we always encourage you to keep learning and exploring these topics.
Absolutely. So what do you think about the future of the penny? Head over to our website and let us know what you think, or share your thoughts on social media.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.